Hi, everybody. I'm Reverend Catie
And I'm Jenna Crawford.
and we're the ministers at First Parish in Needham Unitarian Universalist. And welcome back to our Zoom couch conversations this year. Uh, we always have a couch conversation about the monthly theme at First Parish. Each month, we choose a theme that has spiritual or ethical import and try to integrate it into our Sunday services and our adult education, our lifespan religious education. And this month, our theme is evolution. And so, Jenna, one of the things I've been thinking about, I think it's a great theme with Easter and Earth Day, and I've been thinking about how our faith, Unitarian Universalism, often refers to itself as a living tradition. We're non-creedal, and that means that we don't have something from 200 or 2000 years ago, as we say, like, this is our faith, these exact words, and we learn them exactly this way. uh, Actually, the expression of what our faith means to us has changed over time. We also used to be, as you know, more than 60 years ago, we used to be two separate faith traditions, the American Unitarian Association and the Universalist Church of America. And they had their own separate faith statements that evolved over time. And when they merged in 1961, they came up with a new set of shared beliefs and sources for their tradition. And then in 1984, we changed them, totally reformatted them, totally rewrote them. And they're the ones that we're more familiar with today, about the inherent worth and dignity of every person, our seven principles, about in our six sources, how we learn from direct experience and the words and deeds of prophetic people. There were more things added in 1995. Actually, even that phrase, the words and deeds of prophetic people, was recently changed. It used to be the words and deeds of prophetic men, and then we added women in, and then we changed it to people to include genderqueer and gender nonconforming folks. So we've modified things. And then back in 2006, apparently it's in our bylaws to make sure that our seven principles and six sources don't become a creed. So back in 2006, there was a commission, a task force put to redoing all the principles and sources, and that didn't go through. But now there's a new one, the Article 2 Commission, which is supposed to be presenting rewritten uh, principles and sources next year at the 2022 General Assembly. I think that there's an initial vote and then another vote in 2023. And it's interesting to think about how these words that are so meaningful to us, if especially if we've grown up with them or gotten so accustomed to them over the last 30, 40 years, that they might not correctly express, they might not be the best expression today of our ethics and values, that we are evolving as a tradition, and that means our language has to evolve, and that we are doing so collectively. It just and it's exciting to think that we're going to get into these big conversations about what would we say is the best expression of our values in these modern times, not from 1984, not from 1995, but today.
Yeah, the seven principles and six sources are all that I've known as a Unitarian Universalist. So it would feel hard to let go of them, but also, since I've been studying in seminary the past 3 years, how important the living tradition is to like living out our faith in the world. It's important to be open to that.
Yeah. Helps us
Um,
kind of practice a little bit of discomfort with change, um, and the part of our faith that is non-creedal. Say, like, okay, even this these ethical and spiritual statements that are so central to so many of us, that even those can change. They are still, as a 19th century Boston minister Theodore Parker said, they're still transient. The permanent is the values, the inexpressible values themselves. The words are transient.
I love that. When I think about evolution, as a former biology biochem major, I think about the doctrine of evolution. So I've always been really interested in Charles Darwin, who was a Unitarian, his faith journey as he was uncovering and writing on the origin of species. And we actually read in my UU theology class over the winter an article that really does a nice job of summarizing Darwin's faith journey as he was coming into new understandings about determinism and about evolution. And I wanted to read a passage of it for you. This is from an article by Dr. Wesley Wildman, who actually was one of my professors at BU. So he writes, unsurprisingly, Darwin's view of God changed as the secrets of the natural world opened before his uncanny gaze. God was no longer necessary to explain the particulars of the world and its teeming life forms. Rather, God's domain was the creation of the potentialities of the world as a whole, a world that answered to the description that the theory of evolution provided. Unsurprisingly, to Darwin, God gradually seemed less personal, benevolent, attentive, and active. Surely such a loving, personal deity would have created in another way, a way that involved less trial and error, fewer false starts, less mindless chance, fewer tragic species extinctions, less dependence on random symbiotic collaborations, fewer pointless cruelties, and less reliance on predation to sort out the fit from the unfit. Darwin arguably never lost his faith in God. Rather, believing that God created through the evolutionary process, his growing knowledge of that process dramatically transformed his view of God. And this left him ill at ease with the anthropomorphic personal theism of his day and with his friends and colleagues who believed in a personal, benevolent, attentive, and active divine being. End quote.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that is
Super
Charles
interesting.
Darwin. We're talking about the 1800s, so that would have been a lot of our other Unitarian theologians at that time were still very strongly arguing for the personal. Well, I'm not going to remember all the sermon names.
Personal, benevolent, attentive.
Right. And I imagine that you would have read this recently in seminary, but I've been out of seminary too long. We had a theologian in the 1800s who was really disturbed by like transcendentalism and the loss of the personal God. So it's interesting to hear that Darwin might have been, at least interiorly, may have been part of that debate about, well, as we learn more about science, what does that do to the God that we believe in?
Right. Most people remember him as a scientist, but he had this like personal wrestling that he was doing, and he really was on the forefront of like reconstructing this idea of God, which is not to say that all of us Unitarian Universalists now believe in Darwin's God, this sort of the creation of the potentialities of the world as a whole. Some theologians who are referred to as process theologians like picked up this idea of God, to the most famous being Alfred North Whitehead and Charles Hartshorne, and created like new cosmologies and new ways of understanding God as this like ground of being, and creating this like just totally different system that fit into that cohered with this idea of evolution. And I just love this passage because it resonates with me a little bit, but also because it just shows what, as UUs, we're sort of charged with doing, of bringing in the source of humanist teachings and the teachings of science and reason, and just wrestling with them. Like, oh, now that I know this, what does this mean for my understanding of God or my understanding of the seventh principle? Or so it's not about what you ultimately, since we're not creedal, the kind of God that you believe in is not important to us, but it's just having these like hard conversations, and doing this wrestling together has always been really interesting to me.
It's a beautiful and unique part of our living tradition that we do wrestle about things that's in many traditions are just assumed and considered quite like just basic foundational parts. That's not we have a lot that's up for conversation in our faith tradition. Not everything. There's still those permanent values with their transient expression, but what kinds of gods you believe in or don't believe in, definitely up for conversation. Well, I'm curious for everybody who's watching us today, how has your faith evolved over time? what kind of evolutions have you seen in the denominations you've been a part of, including Unitarian Universalism? Please let us know. We're interested to hear from you. So you can comment wherever you're watching this, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook. And you can also email us. Our email addresses are available on the church's website, uuneedham.org. And we hope that we will hear from you soon, and that you'll enjoy whatever journey you're on with your faith as we continue to evolve individually and as a species. Thanks so much for watching.
See you next month.
Bye.